Welcome to Lake Lanier, where under the waters, the calm, serene waters of the lake, you can find an entire town, you can find a cemetery, you can find a racetrack, and maybe even some ghosts. From its humble beginnings as a water source for the city of Atlanta, Lake Lanier has blossomed into one of the coolest hangout spots in all of North Georgia, and a place where everybody wants to be for boating and all kinds of different fun stuff to do on the water close to Atlanta. And without further ado, we are going to talk about the top 3 things to know about living on Lake Lanier. But before we get into that, I wanted to introduce myself. My name is Tim Gibson. I am a realtor in North Georgia. My channel is, as you might have guessed, it's all about North Georgia real estate. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and if you are looking to move, you want some more info on the area, my contact info is right here on the screen. I would love to help you out. All right, so let's jump into Lake Lanier. Let me give you a little bit of history about the lake itself. First and foremost, Lake Lanier is a man-made lake. It was constructed back in the 1950s. The Army Corps of Engineers came up with a project to help the city of Atlanta for hydropower, for water source for the city of Atlanta, and also for flood control in North Georgia. So they built Buford Dam, which is down on the south side of Forsyth County. I think it even might touch into Gwinnett County. So they dammed up the Chattahoochee River back in the 1950s, and they created what's now known as Lake Lanier. Lake Lanier was named after a renowned local poet named Sidney Lanier. So Sidney Lanier was well known for his lyrical poetry, from what I hear, and for his contribution to American literature. The creation of Lake Lanier naturally required some various areas in North Georgia to be flooded. Creating Lake Lanier naturally caused lots of different areas to be flooded. A lot of communities were displaced, a lot of farmers, a lot of forests, a lot of natural beauty in a natural area, and local communities were displaced because of Lake Lanier. It did bring a lot of economic benefits to local residents as well. You get a lot of residential and recreational opportunities from the creation of Lake Lanier, but also, there was a lot of families and communities that were displaced. So that's something I definitely wanted to mention about Lake Lanier and the creation. But since its completion, Lake Lanier has become a very popular destination for recreation and people that want to be out in the water. Not only do local Georgia residents love Lake Lanier, but people come from all over the country to visit Lake Lanier, and anything that you could want to do on the water or close to the water is available to those who are interested. You have camping, you have boating, you have kayaking, fishing, you got anything you would want to do, hiking, all that good stuff. You can find all of that right there on Lake Lanier. It's a massive lake with a ton of stuff to do. Also, really quick, I want to mention that Lake Lanier touches 5 different counties in North Georgia. And those counties are Forsyth, Hall, Dawson, Lumpkin, and Gwinnett counties. All right, I mentioned just briefly that Lake Lanier is a massive lake, and how big is Lake Lanier? So let me give you some stats on that. So the surface area of Lake Lanier is actually 38,000 acres. That's massive. 1 acre, if I remember correctly from real estate school, is 43,560 square feet. So multiply that by 38,000. That's a big number. And when it's at full pool, Lake Lanier is actually one of the largest lakes in Georgia. All right, this is crazy to me, but at its max capacity, Lake Lanier can hold somewhere around 5 trillion gallons of water, which that's a lot. I don't even know how to compute that in my brain. It's also got somewhere around 692 miles of shoreline, so there's lots of places for you to enjoy on Lake Lanier due to its massive size. All right, so what are the top 3 things you need to know about owning a house on Lake Lanier? Number 1, houses on Lake Lanier aren't cheap. I'm sure you already guessed that, but I gotta go ahead and say it because sometimes people will call in, they say, hey, I want a lake house, it's 3,000, 4,000 square feet. I want my own private dock, and I want to buy that for around, $300,000. Probably not going to be happening anytime soon. Why are houses not cheap? Naturally, any waterfront property anywhere in the country is going to be more expensive than houses that are similar, that are nearby, that aren't on the water. All right, specifically on Lake Lanier, they're not making any more shoreline. So whatever's there is there, and that's what you're gonna get. So that premium is there for those lakefront properties, of course. One thing I wanted to mention too is that the Army Corps of Engineers manages the shoreline of Lake Lanier, and they are also in charge of issuing dock permits. And what I wanted to mention about that is that the Army Corps of Engineers is not issuing any more dock permits on Lake Lanier. So what that means is that any house that has a dock or a dock permit is a lot more valuable than a house that is just on the water. Since the Army Corps isn't issuing any more dock slips, all of those properties are going to go up in value because you've got a house with a dock, and someone that might even be next door to you, they don't have that house with a dock. So guess what? You've got a place to park your boat, you got a place to go swimming, a place to store your stuff for the lake, and the neighbor may not have that. So your house, if you were to have a house on the lake and with a dock permit or a dock, then you are actually doing a whole lot better. Since the Army Corps isn't offering any more or issuing any more dock permits, that's why those houses with the dock permits or that have their own docks are staying high in value. The way that the Army Corps actually issues these dock permits is pretty scientific. They measure the width of the cove, they make sure that the docks aren't too close to each other, and they do all kinds of math and stuff. Basically, all that matters is they're not issuing any more permits right now. And naturally, they're worth their weight in gold. If there's no more dock permits, then hey, you need to jump on a house that already has its own dock permit or its own dock. And speaking of the Army Corps of Engineers, if you have a home that is on the water, on Lake Lanier, you don't actually own the property all the way to the water's edge. The Army Corps of Engineers, like I mentioned just a couple seconds ago, they own the entire shoreline and they manage the entire shoreline around Lake Lanier. And they are very, very particular about what you can and cannot do on Army Corps property, which is what touches the water. And if you are familiar with lakefront property in other parts of the country, or maybe even the state of Georgia, I thought that this would be an important note to point out to you, simply because you can, obviously, if you own a house that's on Lake Lanier and you have your own dock, you would need to cross Army Corps property to access your dock. But there's a lot of rules and regulations against what you can't do. They're very particular about cutting down trees on Army Corps property, and a lot of that has to do with erosion. They want to make sure that people aren't just clear cutting trees all the way to the water and having a lot of land erode into the lake. All that to say, you know, the Army Corps does own that property that touches the water's edge and even a few feet up. And your property, if you were to buy a house on the lake, would touch the Army Corps property, but you wouldn't own all the way to the water. So I want to make sure you guys know about that. All right, and last but not least, let's talk about Lake Lanier being haunted. I think some of this is urban legend, I think some of this is myth, and I think there may be some truth to some of it as well. But like I mentioned a few minutes ago, there were lots of small communities, small towns, there were farms, there were family, communities that were right there up in North Georgia prior to Lake Lanier being formed. And, I've heard a lot of stories about the government seizing land, going through and taking people's property and basically saying, hey, we're making this new lake out of the Chattahoochee River here, and you've got X amount of days or X amount of months to evacuate or vacate the property, and if you don't, we're flooding it anyways. Now, obviously, that's my very rough synopsis. I don't know all the details about it, and I don't want to go into it in the video, but that's kind of what I've heard about how it went down. So this was obviously back in the 1950s, and a lot of these people were displaced or whatever, but the reason why people say that it was haunted is because there were some towns in North Georgia, that specifically a place called Oscarville, where the government just said, hey, we're flooding this place, and some people chose to stay. There were cemeteries that were flooded, there were family farms, all this stuff. And so there's a lot of crazy stuff. There's people that will go scuba diving and they'll find old cars, they'll find old cemeteries. I think somewhere in Gainesville, there's actually an old racetrack that whenever it was flooded, and then whenever the lake level got really, really low, you could actually see the bleachers of the old racetrack that was kind of coming above the water line, which is kind of interesting. Also, as with any lake, probably anywhere, or any body of water where people are doing recreational activities, sadly, there will be some people that pass away as a result of being on the water, drownings and things like that. But, a lot of people say that, Lake Lanier is haunted because there seems to be some sort of abnormal amount of fatalities. I don't know if that's true or not, but anytime there's a tragedy on Lake Lanier, all the people come out and say, oh, Lake Lanier is haunted. I don't know. Maybe it is. I have been on Lake Lanier a lot. I've been up in this area for, maybe 20 years or so. And I haven't seen any ghosts that I know of, but I don't know, maybe if you're out there and you're watching and you've seen a ghost under the water, on the water, close to the water, let me know in the comments. More than likely, the reported sightings of ghosts over the past couple of years are probably just me swimming under the water because I'm super pale. And I guess maybe people just think I'm a ghost. Who knows? Ooh, yeah, I'm a ghost. No, I'm not a ghost. All right, so let's jump into some real estate stats real quick. And I want to just give you a clear picture of what you could expect to spend for a house with its own dock on Lake Lanier. Now, before I get into that, Lake Lanier, you have about 3 different options as far as having a boat slip or a dock on the lake. Number 1 would be your own private dock. That's obviously the most ideal for most people. You got a house right there on the lake, you got a walkway down to the water, and you got your own dock. Number 2 would be a community dock. So you're in some sort of community that has a community dock or multiple docks, and you have your own slip that you pay typically the HOA for, and you've got your own slip dedicated to your property. And accessing the water on Lake Lanier, let's say you buy a house that's on the water, but you don't have your own dock or you don't have your own dock permit. At that point, your option would pretty much be to go to a local, one of the local parks on the lake that's got a public boat ramp. But all that aside, let me give you some real estate, some reality on what you could expect to pay for a house that's got its own boat dock. All right, so we're gonna start low. So low, this is actually kind of surprising to me. I'm in the area, I live close to Lake Lanier, but this is kind of surprising. The first house is actually $450,000 and it does have its own single slip dock. This house is located at 6311 Sparrow Court in Gainesville, Georgia. That's in Hall County, and it's 450 grand. I mean, it's a 1,300 square foot house. I'll show you some pictures here, but man, that's kind of surprising. All right, so this one's gonna be right in the middle of kind of the listings that are available, at least currently in April of 2024. So this one is in Hall County as well. It's 4474 Travis Drive in Oakwood, Georgia. Oakwood's very close to Gainesville, and this house is listed at $1.375 million. You know, around that $1 million to $1.5 million for a house on the lake is very common. So this is why I picked this one. It's kind of in the middle. All right, and last but not least, this is the highest price house that I could currently find listed on Lake Lanier in April 2024. It's 3406 Thunder Point in Gainesville, and as you can see right here, this place is massive, overlooking the water, great view, huge house right there on the water, and it's listed at $5.75 million, roughly somewhere around there. All right, so as you can see, that's 3 vastly different houses, and tell me what you thought about these price points, and were you surprised at all at the different price points and what you could get for your money on Lake Lanier? All right, so what'd you think of the video? The top 3 reasons or top 3 things you could expect if you were to buy a house on Lake Lanier. Let me know if I missed anything. Let me know if there's anything you wish I would have covered in the comments. As always, my number is on the screen, my email's on the screen. If you're ready to take the plunge, buy a house on Lake Lanier, or if you just are curious about the area, please reach out, I'd be happy to help. Boo, I'm a ghost. Haha, just kidding. Okay, well that was it for this video. We'll see you on the next one. Thanks for watching, and we'll talk soon.